Okay, we'll open with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the beautiful winter day that we had today and the glorious sunshine this afternoon. And Lord, we are so thankful we've had a mild winter so far. Lord, we do want to put a special prayers out tonight for Pastor and Stacey and Kristen and Dennis with their loss. Lord, just uplift them, keep their spirits high. Of course, it's good. All of us feel the loss, but we know where Jimmy is tonight. And Lord, we also put out a prayer for those that are ill, especially Vicki. Sounds like she's maybe getting better. She's home from the hospital and suffering from pneumonia. And Pastor Tom is very ill this week and not doing well today at all. So we ask you, Lord, if you would just let the doctor do his thing and bring Tom around to where he's comfortable. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, we'll get into this tonight. Jump into the Mideast. Of course, we haven't been together for a couple weeks. There's been some major happenings, especially the last few days. People are already wishing for 2023 to come back. 2024 is off to a very bad start. And depends on which side of the ball game you're on. In the Mideast with Israel, they're still working, of course, in the Gaza Strip. They are hitting in Lebanon and they're hitting in Syria. They're really having a lot of problems starting to, it's getting more intense in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. And they're finding that there's tunnels there too that they were not aware of. I'm really kind of surprised they aren't aware of the tunnels in all the areas. And especially if this spills over to where they're going into Syria and Lebanon, and probably Jordan. Hezbollah's tunnels are more sophisticated than the Hamas tunnels are, from what they know. So this tunnel warfare has gotten to be quite interesting, and it's such slow going. They did not anticipate when they went into Gaza that it was going to take as long as it is, but they're staying with it. The big thing that's happened just in the last several days. Israel, they didn't claim it. They haven't claimed responsibility for it. But there's not many organizations over in that part of the world that can have a 2-story apartment sitting between 2 8-story buildings, nearly touching, and take the 2-story building out and not touch the other 2. And that's what they did. And when they did that, they took out one of the top Hamas officials. The Hamas leader, one of the leaders that has been kind of the mastermind of putting together some of this stuff. He's been the one that's masterminded how to create the money they need or have needed. He's a financial whiz. It's the thing of it is the timing on this stuff. Israel has to have known where it has been all the time. Why did they pick yesterday to take him out? Don't know. But I do think that's a question that's may get answered someday. Why haven't they taken him out prior to this? Because they know where he's at. They know where some of these guards are and how their movements are. Well, the other thing that had happened, like I said, he was killed in Beirut. They took him out in Beirut, Lebanon, and I forget, there were several more killed with him. They have taken out, I forget, 6 or 8 high Iraqi military officials since we were together last time over the last several weeks, both I think in Syria and in Lebanon. And then yesterday, the Iranians were having a march and not a celebration, but I guess it would be kind of a funeral march for this Soleimani that was killed several years ago. Well, yesterday was the anniversary of his death, So they were having a big march going to the graveyard, and for that, somebody set off 2 bombs, killed over 100 and wounded over 200. And so far, it's funny, ISIS, of all people, we defeated ISIS, they're gone. Remember? ISIS no longer existed, we took care of them. But ISIS claims yesterday that they set the bombs in Iran and took them out. Iran's blaming the United States and Israel. ISIS is claiming responsibility for it. The other thing I read just today on ISIS has put word out to all of their operatives clear around the world to start doing lone wolf deployments, where that is a guy acts on his own. It's not like you're going to have a gang of terrorists come in, shoot the place up. You're going to have somebody come in and set themselves on explosions or do something on their own. And ISIS is calling, and we know there's ISIS operatives here in the United States. There's ISIS operatives clear around the world. That was a known thing back when we supposedly took them out. In the Mideast, we supposedly defeated them. But obviously that's not happened. The other thing that is going on, and this just happened a few hours ago, we've been talking about the Houthis that's from Yemen that's been attacking the vessels in the Red Sea. Okay, the Western world put their coalition together. I forget, there's somewhere between 14 and 20 countries. I never could get to the bottom of it. Some of them don't even want their names used. But anyhow, they put a warning out. See, the Houthis hit another Maersk tanker or shipping big ship the other day and created a fire, and they have disrupted shipments through the Red Sea, and it's causing supply problems, and especially in some parts of Europe. It's increasing the prices on stuff because they have to now go around South Africa, the tip of Africa, to get there. But long story short, after they hit this last big ship, this coalition put out an emphatic warning to the Houthis. Don't be doing this stuff anymore. So the Houthis answered. They fired another rocket. So it's going to be interesting to see, because this is in-your-face brinkmanship, on the edge of war. I don't know. It's the other thing that surprised me a little bit. The United States is pulling one of the aircraft carrier groups out of the Mediterranean. Yeah. The George Bush is coming back. Supposed to be head on the way back to Norfolk. It surprises me in one way, but not another, as I thought about it more, and I've not read this anywhere. China's going to move, and I sincerely believe China's going to move on Taiwan sometime sooner rather than later, especially before the election takes place. I just can't believe they're not going to. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Xi Jinping told Biden China will take Taiwan to his face. Told him to his face. It may be that we're anticipating that China is going to move, and we don't want 2 carrier groups sitting in the Mediterranean. That'd be a long way from the action and take them quite a while to get into position. I think, I could be wrong, but I think we have 8 carrier groups altogether. We keep one in the South Pacific all the time. But they're not, I think it's the Eisenhower that's been down there for a while. These guys rotate. The George Bush carrier group's been on maneuvers for 8 months, so they're probably due to come into port, take a break. So but I don't know. I mean, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but you can speculate.
The guy on TBN this morning said that China is going to do that in order to keep the U.S. spread thin, because we are in Ukraine, we are in the Middle East, and then if we go to Taiwan, we're like a sitting duck.
We are right now.
With our military numbers down.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last time we were together. The numbers, the numbers aren't good. such a high percentage of our aircraft, they can fly, but they can't operate their weapon systems because we still have a lack of chips that are being made in China. The maintenance on airplanes, I don't know what our readiness factor is, but it's probably the lowest it's been in 20 years.
Why can't we manufacture chips here?
Well, we're going to.
Oh,
They're building factories, but it takes about 2 or 3 years or more to build a factory. So, and it's all because they farmed all this stuff out over the years. We left ourselves very vulnerable. The other thing is, we talked about it the other day, our oil reserves are an all-time low. So that's a factor. China knows all this stuff. China knows our munition levels that we have in store are way down because we've been giving it all to Ukraine. Now we've been giving it to Israel.
The president said we were
Pardon?
out. The president said on national TV that we gave all of our ammunition.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like John said, the president. I mean, this isn't secrets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's common knowledge. You know, the president even acknowledged how they're down. We don't have the capacity to fill the coffers back up. It's going to take several years to get the machinery running again to where you can, start replenishing everything. So yeah, you're right. The comment that Marcy made was that China knows that we're very in a weakened state now, and we are. We're trying to support Ukraine. We're trying to support Israel, so China knows that. China's told Biden bluntly, we're going to take Taiwan back, and I think they will do it. Now, we'll skip ahead a little bit to talk about China for a few minutes. There's some other reasons China wants to do this. Number one, the number of worker protests in China is at a record high. They've been building over this last year. This last year, there was more and more worker protests in China. If you remember, and Chinese, of course, the CCP, the government, they're very much aware, the communists are very much aware of this, ruling party. To the point, if you remember, maybe a month, 6 weeks ago, I reported to you that China has been building military facilities in the major industrial sites. They're going to the cities. A lot of these cities over there have anywhere from 11 to 20 million people in them. I mean, our cities don't match anything what they have. And so many of these are built around an industrial complex. And that's what China, that's the nuts and bolts of keeping China going. Well, they have police forces, but what they've been doing this last year is creating military units separate from the police force in these major industrial sites. Major reason, control the people. What they will do if they go to war, they will shut it happened part of the time during COVID. They shut the gates on the factories and made them stay there and work. They weren't allowed to go home. And now you're going to have military units that's going to reinforce that. The economy in China is not good. People are wanting. There is no work in some places. There are some hunger issues in some places. There's a lot of worker unrest. Well, one way to correct that is go to war. I mean, that's been an age-old thing. If your back's against the wall and your people are all getting unrest and, not happy, go to war.
Stimulates the economy.
Yeah, put the economy back to work. So you got that factor. You got the fact they know that the United States is the weakest we've been since World War II. There's no doubt about it. And the fact that China believes Taiwan belongs to them and they're going to take it back. So you start looking at all that, and yeah, the odds are we'll be talking about China making a move. The thing of it is, I don't worry about nuclear weapons on this unless North Korea does something really stupid, which they could. I mean, yeah, that's a wild card up there. But we would not use nukes against China over Taiwan. There's no way. Not going to happen. So, and they're not going to use nukes over there either. So, because why destroy the one thing they want? And it's a very valuable piece. That's the finance capital of the world is Taiwan. I mean, If you haven't, here's the thing. You ought to get on YouTube a little bit and look at videos of Taiwan, Dubai, UAE. These cities are fantastic. We don't have anything that even comes close to these cities here in the States. Nothing. It's just amazing. Did any of you watch the firework display on Dubai?
Yeah, at your house.
Oh, that's right, you were there. Yeah, I just sat there with my mouth open while I was watching. I mean, it's just awesome. So, yeah, it's perilous times for sure. Excuse me. Back over in the Mideast, Biden has put us in a real bind on Yemen. Major reason was the day that he took office, he removed the Houthis from the terrorist list.
Yeah.
Trump had them as a terrorist organization, which changes, there's some laws governing how we can operate and deal with terrorist organizations, okay? Well, Biden removed that day one. And we've been feeding the Yemenis. I mean, the starvation over there is terrible. That's something else you want to see what you're faced with. The terrorists there again take almost all the aid that comes in. I guess from what I read, Hamas is still doing that in Gaza. They're taking the majority of the relief stuff that's coming in. The Hamas terrorists, they're taking it. People aren't getting it. Today there was 197 semi-loads of goods that went from Egypt into Gaza Strip on the south end. But from what I read and what I see on the news that I trust, Hamas is taking the majority of that. So, but anyhow, Biden set up this thing in Yemen in that we're feeding the people, we're feeding the terrorists and everything. We've taken them off a terrorist list, and they're lobbing rockets at us. So it's to show you. The other thing is show you the high intensity of what's going on over there right now today as we're sitting here. Blinken's on his way back to the Mideast, our Secretary of State. So, and he'll be making rounds again. So it's a very, very volatile situation. The other thing that's going on, politics is starting to play in the cards in Israel. Up to this point, Netanyahu's been in total, and he is still in total control, but they haven't been hammering him so much on the political end of things. But that changed this last week. One reason you know that is their Supreme Court made a ruling against, and I still don't understand. I've tried to understand this thing on how it's an inner structure of how their Supreme Court can countermand the rest of the government. But the thing of it was, this has been building since the summer. The Supreme Court finally made a ruling this last week. They was getting ready to back 1st October. Of course, the war started, and they've set it on the back burner. But now they ruled this week, and the ruling actually goes against the conservatives. It's a liberal conservative thing is what it is on who's controlling the government. But the politics are starting to play. You're seeing more and more people coming out telling Netanyahu he needs to resign, step aside. And you didn't see that over the first couple of months of the war. But that's starting to play. And the reason being is Israel has command of Gaza. Not total, don't get me wrong. They don't totally control it, but they've got it. I mean, they will if they keep doing what they're doing. And so because now you're starting to see people talk about, okay, what's the next step? Once Israel says, yeah, we're done with hammering Hamas, what happens over there? What some of the Israelis want to do, it come from two different groups. Netanyahu's idea is, and I think it also, they had a similar proposal come out of that war council that they put together. They want to take these cities and kind of make them autonomous cities within that area and let it'll almost be like a local tribe run it. Instead of trying somebody running the whole country, they kind of break it down to where they've got units, and the locals would run themselves. There'd have to be some, overarching political structure to that, or government structure. It wouldn't have to be political. It could be UN or whatever. But that's what's being floated as a possible. Of course, the United States come out and says, no way in hell. I mean, our administration is just, everything comes out of their mouth. It's just absolutely amazing to me. Any questions on Mideast that maybe I didn't cover? We haven't been together a couple of weeks, but that's pretty much where we're at. It's as hot right now as it's ever been. And in the next few days, you're going to see how Iran responds to the killing with the funeral yesterday, funeral march. And we're going to see how Hezbollah is going to respond, and Hamas, to both of them together, how they're going to respond to the killing of the head Hamas guy. That's where it's Savaldo right now, to see what their response is going to be. Israel's on needles and pins. How many of you follow Amir Tsarfati? A couple of you do. I follow him on Telegram all day. I go to his Telegram thing twice a day, morning and evening. I was telling Heather yesterday, I was watching a thing on YouTube he had. You can pick it up if you would dial up Amir Tsarfati on YouTube and watch his last one. You get a feeling for how it's starting to wear on the people, and on him in particular. Most everybody over there that's in Israel has some relative that's in the service. They have some close tie to it. He's got a daughter, and I think he's probably got other relation too that's involved, but he has a daughter that's in the Navy. But you can just see the wear and tear on him, I think, if you watch him regular. So, and he talks a little bit about how how it's wearing on the Israeli people in total. One thing that's happening, I didn't mention, Israel is kind of backed down a little bit on they're moving some troops out of Gaza, and they've backed off a little bit on their airstrikes. Reason being, they got to bring some of these reservists home and put them back to work. I mean, they're paying a tremendous price economy-wise because there's so many of these reservists. I think there's like 300,000 of people. And then you got to remember, Israel's only 11 million people. It's not a big country. And 300,000 people out of your workforce fighting next door and been doing it for 3 months. It starts, the economy is taking a tremendous hit. So you're going to see them rotating their people back some. In Europe, Russia is heavily bombing Ukraine. And it looks like what they've done over the last several months. Of course, everything is on hold now because it's winter time over there. The Ukrainian offense that Biden's and our Congress is just as bad. I mean, it's not just Biden. All the darn Republicans that are of any stature, McConnell and Graham and those guys, they're all idiots when it comes to this. And they're liars. I mean, that's the other thing. They all lie. We've been lied to. They were all about, we're going to put all this over there, and Ukraine's going to do an offensive, and they're going to knock Russia back. Russia didn't move. Russia stayed exactly where they were. And Ukraine paid terrible price. Russians did too, don't get me wrong. Russians been a lot of people killed. But Russia did not move back. And then, since they've seen that's failed, they're pushing Ukraine to go to peace talks, which we talked about in the last several weeks. But what Russia's been doing looks like the last month, they've been using mainly drones to come over and to attack the Ukrainian side. Well, what they've been doing, they've been using those things to map out the Ukrainian defenses. Well, the last several days, they didn't send drones, they sent missiles. and rockets, and they've done a lot of damage, and they're hitting major cities. You know, I've talked to you about that map you can pull up on the activity, 24-hour activity in Ukraine, Russian along the line. Usually that whole line's just full of bombing signs. Now the bombing signs are scattered out into the Ukraine, and it's because Russia's attacking. Russia's going to start making the civilians pay over there. They're trying to hit factories and utility sites again. And the missile launch they did Monday, see, today's Thursday, I think it was Monday, is the largest since the war started. They fired like 128 missiles at one time. And what they're doing, they're overloading the Ukrainian defenses and doing damage. And it looks like they've been mapping all this out for several weeks now. Like I said, there's more calls for the Ukraine to negotiate with Russia, and that's about it on that. As far as European Union in general, their Palestinian protests continue. That's been a big deal. They've had thousands upon thousands of Palestinian supporters falling out in the streets in all the countries. It hasn't been in any particular place, but all across Europe has been heavy Palestine support protests going on. China, we talked a little bit about it. The other thing I didn't mention a minute ago, another thing that kind of leads you to think he's preparing for war. He's got a new defense minister. He fired the last one. The other guy disappeared, which that happens a lot in China. He has a new defense minister. He's shuffled now, I think, like a half a dozen ministers in the government. And one reason he's doing that, I told you a few weeks ago, Xi Jinping now, some of the Chinese commentators are comparing him to Mao, and that's what Mao Zedong did. They kind of in control, they're kind of the leader, and then they got your party leaders along with them. Well, eventually he gets powerful enough, that's what Mao did, got powerful enough that he started eliminating the ministers that he didn't think he could trust. Before that time, he couldn't have got away with it. They'd got rid of him. But once he gets to a certain level, he can start controlling who's his buddies around him. That's exactly what Xi Jinping's doing right now. He is reshuffling things because he's in total control, and the rest of them can't stand up to him. Talked about the worker protest. The U.S. and Philippines are causing quite a bit of conflict with China in the South Pacific. That's the other thing I didn't mention. That's been going on. We're doing a joint exercise right now with the Philippine Navy in the South Pacific. And it's back because China's pushing to take those islands that's south of them, in between them and the Philippines. There's all kinds of islands down there. And if you ever look on a map, you might be surprised. But China's been trying to take that. They've been trying to push the Philippine fishing fleets out of the fishing waters down there. And so the United States is kind of bolstering the Philippines. The Philippines were actually kind of drifting away from us and have over a few years, but now they're back buddies with us because they're afraid of China. Let's talk about here at home. I've already run about 30 minutes. Be aware that internet censorship is taking place big time, and it's going to accelerate over the next few months because they're getting more and more AI involvement in the censorship. And one of the big major players behind all this is our military. Our military is part of this censorship effort. So keep that in mind. Did you pick up on the Arab protesters attacking the Democratic Christmas party in Michigan? Oh, I thought that was great.
I heard something about that, but
Yeah. Oh, they did. The Democrats up there, I think it was outside Detroit or Ann Arbor, I forget, one of the two. They're having their big Christmas party, where here shows up all the Muslims protesting the Palestinian in the war, and Hamas disrupted the Democrats, okay? So it's back to this thing that the enemy of my enemy is my friend type thing, and as things starts falling apart, I just thought it was great. Did you pick up on the Palestinian truckers slowing traffic down in Chicago? No? Wow. Did you pick up on the Palestinian protesters shutting LA airport down?
I did see that.
Okay. Yes, you're picking up on some of it. Thing of it is, there's a lot of this going on. It's just not being reported. Mainstream media is not reporting this stuff, but it's happening. Did you pick up that? Now remember, I think 2 weeks ago I made a comment about, and that's these truckers and this LAX and everything. I said, people's going to start getting enough of this stuff. They're going to start shooting somebody over it. That's what's going to happen here and start firing things up at home. Well, guess who got shot this week? An imam in New Jersey got shot and killed.
Who?
Yeah, an imam. That's a Muslim minister that runs the mosque. You have a mosque and you have an imam there. And I tell you what,
Imam.
huh?
I thought it was pronounced imam.
It may be. You want to get your eyes open? Get online and look up and listen to what these guys are preaching in these mosques here in the States. Yeah.
Throw the government.
Yeah, you ought to you want to get your eyes on what's going on. You don't know it's happening right here in Indianapolis. I'll guarantee you.
Well, they have it on billboards in Dearborn, Michigan, that they're going to destroy the United States from
Yeah.
the inside out.
We've got a hotbed mosque Muslim organization on 38th Street in Indianapolis. I can show you exactly where it's at. And you ought to listen into what these people are preaching and getting away with it. You know, if you did that, if Richie did that here in church, he'd be in jail. But they can get away with it and are getting away with it. And they're keeping their people fired up. The other news is we set a new record this week. Our debt now exceeds $34 trillion. Now, yeah, so what? Well, the funny thing was, in 2020, they forecast that our debt would reach $34 trillion in 2029. It reached it in 3 years later, it had already reached it. And it was funny today because in the White House, some reporter had asked the press secretary about this, said, got any comments on the exceeding the 34 trillion debt, and her comment was, well, it's the Republicans' fault, and then went into a reason why it was the Republicans' fault. So
She never gives a reason for anything.
no, she's quite something to watch. The only thing I'll leave you with is watch the mess in Congress the next few weeks, because we've got the debt ceiling coming up in another week or so, and you just had the congressional, I think there was 60 representatives, all Republican, went down to the border yesterday to look the situation over. And yeah, Congress is going to be a real mess when they come back. They're coming back off of vacation. And
we saw a thing this morning about the North Carolina ballot. And what did it say, son?
Oh, it said that on the Democratic side, how normally you might have 3 or 4 people you can vote for. The only choice you have to vote for is Biden.
really,
So I'd be like, well, guess what? I'm not voting.
Jeff,
I
Jeff,
wouldn't vote for him.
yeah, Jeff and Charlotte brought up, and I've not seen that. I'll look that up. On the North Carolina ballot, on who you can vote for on the Democratic side for the primary, I assume. Normally where they have 3 or 4 people listed, there's only one listed, and that's Biden. So this election's just gonna boil up.
What about was it Colorado taking Trump off the ballot?
Yeah, that's going to the Supreme Court. The question is about Colorado taking Trump off the ballot.
And Maine.
Maine's done it. There's a couple other states that's getting ready to do the same thing. It's going to be interesting. This has to be done relatively quickly, maybe. The Supreme Court, let's see, if I remember right, the Supreme Court has like 3 different roads they could take on this. They can jump into it quick, and then that will determine who will be able to be listed on the ballots in the primaries, because the primaries start in March. All right? Now, if they don't do that, they could wait and take it under advisement and set a date to hear for a hearing, and then their goal would be to come to a decision by sometime in June, which then would give the states plenty of time to have the fall ballots corrected. All right? And then the third option is, I think they were talking about they actually could be put off to after the election. So it'd be interesting, and you'll know here in the next few days what the Supreme Court's going to do. I think, if I remember right, I thought by the 6th, which is what, day after tomorrow? Day's the 4th? Yeah. Maybe the 1st of next week. I would think definitely by sometime next week we're going to know where this is headed. It's interesting. The thing that's interesting to me on that is this. If it stands that Trump can be removed from the ballots, it means that the man is being held accountable for something he's not even been tried for yet. He's not been in court yet on this for him to rule on it.
Well,
Been no
didn't
ruling
they
made.
take him off the ballot for, like, the reason was for the insurrectionist?
Yeah,
thing,
that's what
but-
I'm saying.
But he's not even being tried for that.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's being tried as part of the, and that's what Jack Smith's doing.
Oh,
But they're
okay.
not in court yet, see? That's what I'm saying. You're holding a man accountable based on pretty simple reading of the Constitution, holding him accountable for being an insurrectionist when he's never even been tried and convicted. So that to me is the interesting part of it. We'll see what happens. Okay, just quickly, I want to delve into anybody got any questions on anything? Okay, I sure miss Tom being here tonight. Back to this thing of getting, things are going to get really squirrely this year. I certainly believe it. At the bottom of my heart, I believe things are really going to be nuts. But here's the thing. I got thinking over the weekend, and I'm talking to myself really. Don't try to get hung up on explaining everything that's happening in terms of end of time prophecy. Don't that's easy to do. It's easy for me to do. Almost everything I see, I get thinking, well, how's that impact? How does that impact? Don't get so hung up on that. I want to read something to you and explain myself a little bit. I'm going to Ecclesiastes. Well, I had it right here. Chapter 3, verse 11. And it says, and it's a setting under God sets eternity in the heart of man. And Ecclesiastes, let me switch to NLT. I think it explains it a little better. God hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also he hath set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. Now what we're talking about here, first of all, it says he's made everything beautiful. That's really not a very good translation. A better translation would be that he's made everything appropriate. Beautiful, we think prettiness and everything, and that's really not, the Hebrew word that's used there is better said appropriate, meaning that everything God's done is appropriate.
The
To his
NASB
being.
says appropriate.
Pardon?
the NASB.
Does it?
It says
Okay,
appropriate.
all right. I never look at that. Maybe I should. Usually what I do, everything comes up in King James Version. I read that and I look at it and I think to myself, nah, there's more to it than that. And that's why then I'll go to NLT and then I'll end up actually going to the Hebrew word or the Greek word to see, further meanings on it. That's the way I do it anyhow. But anyhow, he's made everything appropriate for its own time, meaning that everything that happens is appropriate at that particular time. So, number one, something happens, anything that happens, just like the killing of this Hamas leader and whatever the response is, it's appropriate for this point in time in God's plan. And the other thing this book is telling us, this verse is saying, no man can find out the work God maketh from the beginning to the end. God has not given us the ability to see the big picture. And I think we all know that, but we sometimes forget a little bit. That we kind of get zeroed in on how this stuff's occurring, and we think prophecy says this, so it's going to go this way. Don't get hung up on it, is what I'm saying. Don't spend too much time trying to interpret a specific thing that happens today in terms of the end time prophecy, and definitely don't let it upset you. Because that's one easy way to get upset. You see that happening and you think, oh my gosh, here, this is what's going to be. And the thing of it is, maybe, maybe not. When this war started October 7th over there, you very easily could jump in, and a lot of people did. And of course, in the back of my mind, and Pastor Tom's too, here we go. We either got maybe the Gog-Magog war starting, or we've got 83 Psalm coming to, we went there, and it's easy to do. So the point, and the reason I'm saying this is because so much is going to be happening, I believe, the next few months, that you drive yourself insane jumping from a conclusion to conclusion to conclusion. Don't do it, okay? Now, the other thing I wanted to give you tonight, let's go to, who knows what the longest book in the Bible is? Anybody? That's where we're headed. And it's really a neat book, Psalm 119. Longest book in the Bible. And the other thing is, which you may know, but it's kind of interesting, and I forget what the Hebrew language term is for doing this. How many letters in the Hebrew language? How many letters? Anybody know? 22. There's 22 letters. The first is Alph, A-L-E-P-H, is pronounced Alph. And I'll mention something here in a minute that's kind of interesting on that for us to look forward to anyhow. But anyhow, Alph is the first. Actually, that's where our word alphabet comes from. You go from Hebrew into the Greek, and you eventually go from the A-L-E-P-H to alphabet. But anyhow, Alph is the first. And if you look at Psalms 119:1, what's the first word of the verse?
Joyful.
Huh?
Joyful.
Really? It doesn't say Alph?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like up there.
Yeah.
And like a.
Yeah. Well, this is the only book in the Bible that every section of the chapters in 119 starts with a letter of the alphabet. And they go through the alphabet. You'll find 22 headings. The next one is Beth. If you look at verse 9, you go from verse 1, Alph, 119:9 is Beth. And if you follow through that, we're not going to tonight, but there's 22 of those. And that's a style of writing. And we could get into a long discussion on it, but we won't. I want you to go to 119 verse 2. Blessed are they that keep his testimonies and that seek him with the whole heart. And then if you go down to 11, It says, "Thy word have I hid in mine heart that I might not sin against thee." And what it's talking about there is, when it talks about it's hidden in your heart, there again, if you look at the Hebrew connotation, it means it's the word, which is this, is protected in your heart. All right? And it's protected there for two reasons. One is so that you can use it at any given time, any given situation. It's protected, it's always there, it's not going away, and you can recall it and use it, okay? And the other thing is that word is protected in your heart. Excuse me. Protected in your heart. That's the little light that goes on that helps you try to keep you from sinning, which we all do on an everyday, daily basis. You have, it's kind of like your conscience, best way to describe it. But that's hidden in our hearts. Once you accept it, and that's one reason why it's important to study the Word, okay? It's very important to build your knowledge on the Word, and you never stop. You never stop building that knowledge. You add to it all the time. But once you take it in, it's protected here. So I want to leave you with those two things. The only other thing I'll do on news-wise, I forgot to mention, start watching for what they're calling PACT, P-A-C-T, PACT for the Future. And what it is, it came out of this COP28 that they had, the UN. There'll be a COP29 at the end of this summer. And Congress of People, is that what that stands for? I forget. Anyhow, the pact is, it's going to be a contract. They're going to have, this is back when, it was Nancy talking about, and I talked about it too, Biden signing over that we would be part of the World Health Organization. Okay, that's a pact. These pacts are going to be signed, and countries are going to come together and sign them together. And what they're planning on, these pacts are going to be an agreement between countries and the UN, and between countries and their people. All right? And Biden's already taken care of some part of it. So, start listening for that when they're talking about the pact for the future. It's going to be a big issue here in the next few months. Okay? All right, for those at home, appreciate you being with us tonight. Keep Pastor Tom in your prayers, and keep the Ware family in your prayers, please. And we're going to sign off and watch the video from Jonathan Kahn.